here we have somebody standing confidently as an independent, and as probably the questioning will bring out, confident of winning. So I just think, really good on TWT for giving this opportunity to Jamie and to all of us. So my first question is simply background. Maybe most of you are familiar, so this answer can be quite brief. But really, why did you decide to stand as an independent, Jamie?
Hello. Be the change you want to see in the world, I think is the answer, isn't it? So I am the North of Tyne Metro Mayor. Yeah, if you want to applaud, don't let me stop you. For 4 and a bit years now, I've been creating good unionised jobs. I've been implementing programmes to deal with the climate emergency. I've been helping the most vulnerable people get skills training so they can earn more money. We've been helping right across the equalities agenda. I mean, I directly work with, for example, disabilities groups to help change policy of companies to help people have the barriers removed to their prosperity. All of these things. It was interesting, the panel that was on before this was talking about, it's about state power. I was involved in setting up the first TWT in 2016, but ran something called the People, Pits and Politics Festival in Durham in 2018. And the question we posed to everyone was, are you serious about taking state power? And I've done it. And I've renegotiated the devolution deal, and I'm going to have 10 times the budget and power that I've got now. And that is going to enable us to really see some big shifts.
Okay, Jamie, I'll come back to going into that in a bit more detail. But one thing that struck me as not maybe odd, but superficially odd is, had Starmer gone too far in his own terms? I mean, why did he block you? Why are you a threat when you're doing such, obviously socially just, progressive things that exemplify why you need a Labour government?
Well, that's a really good question, Hilary, because a lot of people have said, this makes no sense. BBC journalists have said to me, this makes no sense. Journalists, councillors, or from the Tory party have been on telly in my region saying, I don't understand why the Labour Party have done this. He's good at his job, he's good at delivery, he's good for value for money. All the things that the Tories claim are good as well. And it's a little bit of the litosies. It's not Keir Starmer who's done it. It is that group within the party who have scorched earth tactics. The people that we saw in 2017 would rather see the Labour Party fail than socialists win. And when you get someone, it's funny because social media, there was a guy on there, and it said something like some more jobs we'd created. And it was, yeah, but you lefties, you're all, fairy. And I put back, I think you should treat me with a bit more respect, because I've ran marathons raising money for veterans. Dad was a tank driver in the army. My brother served in the Navy when the Falklands was on. And he comes back and he says, and I've had a look at your record and it's actually really good. So the electoral success would have been there. Now, if you get someone avowedly a socialist, and I never hide politics, I believe Britain should be run in the interests of the people who do the work, and that resonates. And you get someone who says that and can show value for money, can show he knows how to navigate the bureaucracy, can deliver things on time and on budget, then where is it left for the neoliberals in the Labour movement to say that would never work? It disproves everything they claim.
So the obvious next question, particularly given your clear commitment to socialism, is the importance of you winning, and really also, can you win? And just linked to that, in a way, what separates you from your rivals, particularly your Labour Party rival? And also, do you think that you've got an appeal that can win back the so-called blue wall voters? I mean, who were red wall voters?
Yeah, well, there's a lot to unpack there, so
yes.
If I forget some, ask me again, Hilary. I was talking to a lad who works for me, and he said he'd been out for a beer with some of his friends, And it came up, oh, I work for Jamie Driscoll. Oh, I didn't know that. And he says, oh, and he works in an engineering factory, this lad. And he said, oh, all my mates were talking about that at work, and we're going to vote for Jamie Driscoll. Now, there's two things there. A, they were saying they were going to vote for me. But much more significant is this has had such an impact in the North East that people in a small private sector employer were talking about it at work. The hope, the only hope that the establishment Labour candidate has is if this doesn't cut through at all. And if people turn up, and we've got to bear in mind that this is a regional election, will be a 30 to 33% turnout, is if people turn up and they don't know anything about it and they just vote with a badge. And that's not happening. We had a campaign meeting on Thursday night and touring right across the North East. This is a big area, by the way. The population of the new North East Combined Authority is bigger than Northern Ireland. It's geographically 5 times the size of Greater London. This is kind of like a mini country. And the new powers I'm getting, maybe we'll come to them, will make a big difference. And so if you get someone there able to show what we can deliver, even within the constraints that we face, then that's a big deal. But the number one thing, time and time again, people tell me, is I don't trust the Tories, I don't trust the Labour Party. You know what? I'll probably vote Labour to get the Tories out, because I like them least, but I'm going to vote for you, because they just disrespect, hatred, everything for what Westminster represents runs through just about everybody. And if you can stand up and show, I know what I'm doing, which you have to do, if you can make the coherent arguments about why your life will be better instead of playing these daft games, and you know what? We're going to see all of the mainstream candidates, including the Labour candidate, be tied in knots trying to defend their national positions. So at the moment, what are we seeing? We call it Independence Day in the campaign team, the day I left the Labour Party and was on the number one story on the news for 24 hours. And that was just that weekend when Keir Starmer had said, we are going to keep kids in poverty, and if you have more than one sibling, tough, we're going to forget you. So how is it that a Labour candidate will ever be able to get off that? Every time they talk about doing anything about poverty, it's saying, criticise Keir Starmer. No, I won't, because I'm a careerist. Well, that's what they all do, because they're all so terrified of breaking ranks, regardless of what they might think or believe. And so that just shows. Let's ask it this way. Who trusts Rishi Sunak to keep a promise? Hands up. None. Who trusts Rishi Sunak to at least listen to you and bear your interests and your needs in mind? None. Who trusts Keir Starmer to deliver his promises? Who trusts Keir Starmer to listen to you and act in your interests? None. Who trusts me to listen to you and act in your interests? That's an awful lot of hands. And probably a few Labour Party members saying, don't catch me on camera. And who thinks that I would keep my promises? And that is the same answer you get from the people of the North East.
Okay, good, Jamie. So the next question is, well, in a way, you're standing both as a protest candidate. I mean, you know, you've illustrated how a lot of people... Yeah, sorry. So just can other people hear? I mean... Okay, so just to be more emphatic. So you're standing both as a protest candidate. That's clear, you know, from the way that people disillusioned with politics will vote for you. But also it seems that, and this is what I want to ask you about the possibilities of, that in a context where the consensus that against which there is the protest is a sort of neoliberal consensus that Starmer has now conceded to, just as Blair did. You know, we had Blatcherism. And... but it's reinforced now materially by the reality of a privatized state. So the reality is neoliberal, which is, you know, different from what it was 40 years ago. And so, in a way, you standing and being able to illustrate the possibility of an alternative is really important. And I'm wondering, you know, given what Thatcher and others have done to destroy local government, what powers do you have left to illustrate, exemplify an alternative in the North East?
Yeah, that's the crux of it, isn't it? We often talk about people being on the left or on the right. I reject them, that characterization. It's about what difference can you make. I'm not someone who's massively ideological in the sense that I'm there. I would reject the idea that I'm a protest candidate. I'm there to make a difference to people's lives and have a track record showing it. This is going to be quite a long answer. Interrupt me if you want to. Has the state been privatised? Yes and no. The reason for privatisation, the real reason, is for profit extraction. We all know that, and any serious academic would back that up. But what has also happened is just the peeling away of whole areas of provision, which haven't been privatised, they have been abandoned. There are lots of support for people, whether it's with neurodiversity, whether it's the support that people with disabilities previously had to go into. They're just gone. And they are now being looked after by the voluntary and community sector. So we work with the voluntary and community sector. We divert budgets into those sectors, and those provisions are now being met. Not in the way I would love. I would love it if the NHS actually dealt with these. I'll give you a story. There's a guy named Peter that I met from one of the programs that we've run. He was a lorry driver. He'd been an HGV driver. He was in his early 40s, 20 years of work. Had a seizure, bang, that's it. His ability to work is gone. He could maybe get a job doing something else, but not on the same money. His financial commitments. His mental health suffered. His relationship broke up. His concerns about his own health suffered. And he got into a very much downward spiral. The one-to-one mentoring course that we funded turned his life around. He recovered his confidence. His mental health is robust now. He's been retrained. He's pursuing a new career. And he has a little baby on the way with his new partner. That has changed his life. These are real things that make a difference to people's lives. The work we're doing, when I bring, and we're very successful, even by the terms that central government said about creating jobs. And creating jobs, you and I, Hilary, are both old enough to remember that was the thing in the 1980s, that work, back in the days when work paid and was a route out of poverty. So I've created over 5,000 jobs in the North East. But when I work with a company to say, come to the North East, we write into the contract, you must operate within the strictures of my Good Work Pledge, which is paying the real living wage, supporting trade union access, developing a diverse workforce with proper training. These are the things that are actually making a difference to people's lives. There was a guy by the name of Dale at one of these companies we'd helped, and I was doing the old turn up in the high vis and the shaking the hands, which is not really natural me, but you have to do that in the job. And I says, so what were you doing before this, Dale? And he says, I worked away a lot, mainly around the Baltic, spent a lot of time in Lithuania. I says, but you got a local accent. He says, yeah, I'm a Geordie lad. I said, so what difference is it now? He says, I've got a young daughter. I get to read her a bedtime story every night. That is changing people's lives. So that's what we can do already. Now, I've negotiated with this new deal 10 times the amount of money and power that we've got now. The north of Tyne was hugely underpowered as a combined authority. It didn't have the powers that Andy has in Manchester or any of the other combined authorities. But we're going to get control of the transport system. So that'll enable me not only to bring the buses back into public control, but to shift the ownership models back to communities so that they can never be privatised again in future. Integrate it to a public transport system where you can get one ticket, metro, rail, heavy rail, integrate it with the active travel. At the moment, people don't cycle because they think the bike's going to be nicked. Simple things like secure parking, but all of it on one ticket helps directly with child poverty, with the climate emergency, with getting cars off the road. So even for people who need to drive, my wife's a GP, she's on call, she needs to use a car, they'll be able to actually get there instead of sit in traffic. And this is the sort of thing that cuts across that, yeah, but how do you appeal to a broad section of voters? Because something either works or it doesn't. And it's common sense to not have anybody sitting in traffic spewing out fumes. Why do we pursue this? Well, the answer is because the whole of politics and governance is these little silos where nobody joins anything up. And that's where the power of devolution comes in. I was asked in a panel event, what powers would you like to see? And I said, well, all right, foreign policy, defence policy, they've got to be national. And I don't want different tax policies. I don't want a race to the bottom. He says, but beyond that, I'd quite like the rest of it. So I'm not calling for a coup d'etat, but I am calling for a coup de north.
So yeah, excellent. Coming as I do from Leeds. So in a way that links to another question on the agenda, which is how far you can use the position to promote the devolution agenda. Well, and the wider democratisation of our political system that you've long argued for. I mean, I think I interviewed you about 3 years ago, and devolution and changing the electoral system and so on was high on your agenda. Now you've got some power. How can you use that to give a higher profile? And do you think Starmer will give any profile to that? Maybe leave that for another question.
All right, yeah.
Get on with the positive. Yeah.
We've got to look at what democracy is. Our public discourse pretends that democracy happens in Westminster. How many people do you think out there feel that they are represented at Westminster? The actual number, if you look at a recent Ipsos poll, is in the low 30%. The vast majority of people do not think that anybody at Westminster is representing them, and they trust even fewer. Right? Some of that is down to expenses scandals. I claim zero expenses. A lot of it's about credibility. But democracy has to be about listening to people. I ran a citizens' assembly on climate change, and we are implementing the results. No other combined authority has done that. I work directly with the Equalities Assembly. I work directly with the trade unions to help them influence our policy on the Good Work Pledge. I make sure that there are representatives of trade unions on every board we set up. And I make myself accessible. I mean, do you really think that Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer, or any actually of the people who are going to run against me would be happy to sit in a hall in a village in County Durham or Wallsend or wherever else it might be and say to people, ask me anything you like and I'll give you an honest answer? And people are turning out in large numbers. We just did one on Thursday, Wallsend, 100, 120 people there. And anyway, saying, he answered my question. Now that is democracy, that's real democracy. About getting it away from party lists and saying directly, we can vote that person out if we don't like him or her. So that matters. And when it comes to the transport system, which is the big new power that comes to the North East, and a lot of money with it, this is where we will develop systems to have people directly feeding in to how they decide their transport system works. So the voice of disabled people is not lost. The voice of single parents with buggies trying to get on and off things is not lost. And that will be supported by a citizens' assembly on transport that I will run, and the regular citizens' jury will feed into it. Now, when people see that and they hear that, they think, why is this the first time I'm hearing this? Shouldn't that be the way it's done normally? And it is so blindingly obvious that it resonates. And this is where you start to think of it as an avalanche. And every avalanche starts with a few stones falling, but then it becomes irresistible. And if I win in the North East next time, and I think I'm going to, but it's up to you to help me, this is not a one-man show, then what does that say to the rest of the country in a general election year? The North East has decided to vote for someone who delivers the core of the 2017 manifesto. He believes in putting people's voices first and believes that we should directly trust the people of Britain to make decisions. I think that's a pretty powerful message.
And then just following the... following the logic of that through to the breakup of Britain, in a way, the devolution of the whole political system. So now you've talked about a deep devolution, but for that to be practical and carried out, we'll need a a break at the middle in terms of regional power, maybe national power. What's your thinking about how, as Mayor of the North East, you can be part of that wider pressure to break up the centralised power of Westminster?
Yeah, so this is getting a little bit into governance rather than politics. There's this strange dichotomy in the people who rule and organise Britain, the civil servants, the politicians. Everybody accepts that you get better results if things are decided by people on the ground who know what's going on. And every government, when they get there, they'll say, oh, we're going to give power to communities, and they'll get there and think, like hell we are. I've been fighting for 15 years to get this, I'm staying here. One ex-Secretary of State said to me, he says, you come into power as a Secretary of State and you think, oh, wow, great, I've got all these powers. And you start pulling levers. And he says, and 2 years in, you realise the levers aren't connected to anything. And he says, if you want something delivering, you're going to have to work with people on the ground. Local authorities are hollowed out. I'm a big advocate that we should restore local government funding and responsibilities that go with it. Are we going to get the money from a Keir Starmer government? I think that everything they're saying is no. And I think I've never, ever heard of politicians before an election saying, we're not going to do that. And then after the election saying, ha, tricked you, I'm going to spend a load of money. Why would anyone do that? That makes no political sense. So they are massively centralising. And we see that in the way the Labour Party is run. You know, you get into trouble if you stand on a picket line, for God's sake, you know. So there is this dichotomy of pressure of you need things to be delivered locally, but we're not going to get the amount of money we need. And this is where the innovation comes in, the community wealth building, the community mapping, understanding who has power in communities, understanding who has influence, and understanding who has the good ideas, where money is better spent. I got control of the adult education budget on the 1st of August 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. There isn't a worse time. And this is teaching chefs and welders and forklift truck drivers, that sort of job. When it was with central government, they'd train 22,000 people a year. We changed the way we used that money. We went out and we spoke to the trainers who delivered it. We spoke to the businesses about how we get a direct link from people doing a course to help them get a job, rather than throwing them out there and saying, don't worry, the market will take care of it. Crucially, we spoke to the people. And we said, what is actually stopping you from doing one of these courses? Or if you've done one of these courses, why did you drop out? We went from 22,000 a year on this money to 33,000 a year with a 96% completion rate. And that, you go to Whitehall like that, and they say, you know what? This guy knows what he's talking about. There's a reason that I managed to get out of Tories like Michael Gove and Simon Clarke and Grant Shapps more money than any other mayor did, despite being a socialist Labour mayor at the time. And because you work through their teams and they say, you know, this works. And there is a truth to the policies we put forward. We're not putting them forward because they are pretty or because they make us feel good in our hearts. We put them forward because we believe it will make life better for people. That reality starts to change things. Now, the political side of it, nobody, almost nobody, believes any good answers are going to come out of Westminster anytime soon. But we are trapped in a two-party system because of proportional representation at the moment. But there are police and crime commissioner elections in May. There are mayoral elections in May. There are local elections in May. You will have the option about who you vote for, whether you vote for a Green, whether you vote for an independent, whether you vote for a Labour candidate who has a backbone and a conscience. And there are a lot of good people still in the Labour Party. That's where we start to see a difference, because when that groundswell starts to change, and there's already independents in Liverpool now, when we start to see that change, you don't have to be Nigel Farage to shift the Tory party to the Brexit and the right position. Power on the ground will start to change Westminster. And, I mean, who knows? If we'd had this conversation when I was elected, Theresa May was Prime Minister. We've had 4 prime ministers, 7 chancellors of the exchequer, a pandemic. Ukraine was just another country then. The world changes more and more rapidly with increasing instability in the climate and in the financial system. Sooner or later, people are going to think, I've had enough of all of them. I think we're going to see a Keir Starmer government. I also think we're going to see Keir Starmer resign when he's unable to deliver things, and there is mass industrial unrest. One of the big differences between 2015, when Jeremy Corbyn, let's be honest, accidentally won the leadership. And that is the truth of it. You know, he stood and thought, wow, what's going on here? We were an incredibly immature movement. We didn't have the links, we didn't have the groups. We had very few people with experience of governance. And although a lot of people are perhaps looking and saying, where is the hope coming from? The movement is much more experienced and much more mature. We will see a wave of people ready to say, here's the alternative. And if I'm in power with state power showing this can be done, then that is the beacon. It's a lot more than the North East. And I would urge you to get on social media, to follow me, to sign up to my list, and when the election is getting closer, to come up and campaign for me, because this will make more of a difference than anything we can do anywhere else.
So you talk about the Starmer government. I'm just wondering how you'll interact with that. Will you be part of the unrest, or will you or maybe it'll be a process. It'll start with negotiations, as with Gove and Shaps and so on, and end up as you being part of the unrest. But, you know, you've talked about how much money you'll need, and obviously you will be dependent to a significant degree on government money. They're not entirely dependent in ways you've explained. But how do you envisage, I mean, you must occasionally, when you're brushing your teeth or having your bath, think about, well, maybe you think of better things, but think about, you know, how you'll envisage how you'll interact with the Starmer government.
Well, to clear one thing up, when I'm having a shower, I'm usually thinking about I need to lose weight and do more exercise, just like everybody else who's in their 50s. What I will do is what I would like every politician to do, which is think, how can I best represent the people of my region and act in their interests? That should not be unusual. But it is, isn't it? So it's about telling the truth. And it's about not saying, I want to be a protest candidate. And Labour councils up and down the country, Labour candidates, Labour frontbenchers, their current argument is, the government's made a mess of this. You think, yeah, but you are going to sooner or later be in power. What are you going to say then? Are you going to say, oh, the last lot left us with a mess, which is exactly what Rishi Sunak's saying, pretending to be a change candidate and inventing bogus policies that he's standing against. You know, you will be forced to have 7 bins full of taxed meat on your car that you'll have to share. But no one was ever going to do that. But that's the political messaging. And that's what we will see. And we're seeing it already. When Keir Starmer was asked, you're cancelling HS2. Yeah, it's terrible, I've cancelled HS2. Are you going to do it? No. And Tory party, the Labour Party is following Labour Party. The Labour Party is following, I'm getting the two confused for good reason. The Labour Party is following Tory policy so closely that it is literally true that Labour policy is being written in Conservative HQ. With a chew title, with saying, Rosebank, we're going to do it. And all they have to do with HS2, for example, sorry, you've got me off on one here, is this, they're going to leave us a mess. Publish a draft bill. You could write it. You're going to have a decent policy. You could write that in 24 hours. And all you say is, all this stuff that the Tories are selling back to the developers, you just say, we'll put an enabling bill through. It's a project of national significance. We will buy it back and force you to sell it at the same price we bought it originally for HS2. No developer is going to take any risk. It protects the route, and you could just get on with it. The reason, and they know that, the reason they're not doing it is because they've bought into this neoliberal belief. that, we can't spend money as the state. We can't actually look at a different way of approaching finance or sustainability, or even giving people long-term secure contracts. So, how would I engage with a Starmer government? With a goodwill, telling truth to power, and ultimately what happens, though, is you are, in the end, dealing with an individual. And and I've seen this with a lot of the Tories who I would, well, not just would, but do very publicly disagree with on a lot of issues. But then when you get them in the room and you say, well, do you want better transport in the North East? Yeah, of course we do. I've got to deal with Treasury, all the rest of it. That's when you say, look, there's this plan here and it works, and it'll give you better value for money than giving it all to some big conglomerate who's going to go down a whole chain of consultants before any money gets spent on the ground, and I'll do you a better job. And they'll think, yeah, all right. And it's that level of ability, someone who's good with finance, someone who's got the vision to see alternative ownership models deliver better value for money. That's when you get that. And with a Starmer government, it's going to be much easier than with a Tory government. I mean, I know a lot of these people. On a personal level, the friendships are still just fine. And the entire trade union movement is going to be wanting to do what I want to do and not what they want to do.
Okay, I mean, it's very convincing what you say, but you do emphasise the power of argument and reason and practicality. What about the question of, I mean, given how entrenched that neoliberal mentality is in the Starmer sort of leadership, I'm just thinking about what power you have, what leverage you have, and in particular whether to enhance leverage you'll need alliances, like with Burnham and Steve Rotherham, whether you're envisaging building up those alliances so that you have power to back up your reason.
Well, Andy and Steve both came out when the Labour Party blocked me for entirely factional reasons to slide their own candidate in. They share my view on a lot of this sort of stuff. It's no secret that Lotto, the leader of the opposition's office, really do not like Andy Burnham. Andy had to go on the radio and say, stop briefing against me. All it took was the ULEZ for Keir Starmer to say, right, Sadiq, you need to sort yourself out. So does anyone think Keir Starmer has the charisma to have commanded a great deal of personal loyalty from even the parliamentary party, or do we think it's people just holding their fingers, or biting their tongues saying, look, let's just get past the election, let's just get the Tories out. We all know it's the latter. The entire country knows it's the latter. But the reason, when I was trying to bring together the North East Devolution deal, there was a lot of the council leaders were, no, it dilutes our power because we have a powerful regional mayor, all the rest of it. But we did it because I know, ultimately, there is an objective reality that you can get people to do things. It is an iron law of politics that everybody, including all of you and me and Hillary, acts in their own self-interests. The job of a progressive politician is to get people to act in their long-term, enlightened self-interests. That's why tackling the climate emergency eventually is something that everyone's going to come around to. That's why we understand that tackling racism is important, because dividing people is just bad for everyone. And that's why when you get policy experts sitting down, even the Tories, and you say, look, keeping these kids in poverty is just going to cost you a fortune in the long term, they will nod, and they will think, yeah, but I can't get it past Treasury. And that's where the innovation comes in and say, look, if you do that, that, and that, stick that into that budget line, then they think, yeah, all right, we'll do that. And so that's part of the alliances. It is really interesting. Like I say, I'm never shy about my politics. That a lot of centre-right think tanks, when I talk about fiscal devolution and powers to mayors, have said, actually, he's right. Why did no one else think of that? And it's because you're looking at it from a different perspective.
Okay, so I'm longing to open it up to everybody. So I'm not quite sure, Andrew, what's the timing? I think we've got 3/4 of an hour. So I'll just ask one final question, which in a way is maybe one that a lot of people want to discuss. But I think what's been good so far is we've talked about the bigger issues outside of the Labour Party, although that's got repercussions for the Labour Party. You've said there are a lot of good people in the Labour Party, and I agree. But there are a lot of people thinking, you know, how much longer can I keep that party card? You know, people are stopping, speaking for myself, stopping going to meetings, you know, for good reason, because there's nothing being done. You know, we'll stop feeling the Labour Party speaks in our name. What do you think your experience means for this traditional debate of inside or outside the Labour Party, which has, you know, I think rather sort of weakened the left? And what advice would you give to people who are thinking about leaving the Labour Party?
A political party is a vehicle for organising. It is not the only vehicle for organising. As we all know, the Labour Party was there to provide political representation for the trade union movement. There are any number of other ways of organising. If you are in the Labour Party and you're quite happy to, you can manage to stay in the Labour Party and you know, not tear your card up in outrage, things will come around sooner or later. If you choose to leave the Labour Party, it's actually easier to get back in than if you've been expelled. So I know some people who've said, look, I'm going to leave now because if I keep talking the way I'm going to do. And we know the rules are getting more and more ridiculous. When you have a party that's led by a human rights lawyer that changes the rules to say the principles of natural justice no longer apply, you know you've gone into a pretty dark place there. And a lot of people on principle are wanting to leave. But you can be active in your trade union. You can be active in campaign groups. You can support me. And I know someone posted a letter through my letterbox saying, Jamie, I'm going to be campaigning for the Labour candidate, but when they give me some leaflets, I'm going to put them straight in the recycling. So there are any number of other ways in which you can support. And you can support on social media easily enough. A lot of people do it. Just set up an account that isn't in your name. Loads of people do that anyway. But what I would say, above all, when it comes to organising, is when you get tired, learn to rest rather than to quit. Grassroots organising is about energy and enthusiasm and person-to-person connection and our shared humanity. And it is that ability to find, where will I get some energy? Where will I draw some strength to keep me going through this? While you've got to do your shopping and pay your bills and get the kids to bed or wherever else you've got to do. And the Labour Party we've passed peak Labour now. Labour is on its way down from being its most popular. And that was post-Truss. At the moment, it's riding that wave of people's utter revulsion for the Tory party, and I'm not going to enumerate that, it takes too long, but, you know, for very good reason. But when you get the cavalry coming over the hill, and you find that they're not going to actually restore public sector pay, not even going to restore council funding, they're not going to, frankly, take on the vested interests that need to be challenged, then they're going to get less and less popular. But the membership of the Labour Party is rather like any dial. They're the people who see the tremors really, really early. Nobody turns up to Labour Party meetings. Wes Streeting, I don't go in for vilifying individuals, but Wes Streeting did an event in the North East. Labour North sent out email after email after email. The number of people who attended, who weren't his staff or Labour North staff, was in single figures. Labour Party members just don't want to hear this. The one thing, doesn't matter where you are in the spectrum of the party, the one thing that unites all Labour Party members is a sense of justice. And they see the way the party is being run. They see the way that they're going to throw children under the bus of child poverty. The reason that recent rule change went in, saying we're going to abolish disabilities reps, BAME reps, youth reps, is because there's no members to do those jobs anymore. So the Labour Party itself will only be revitalised when people see it as a moral force for good and not a vehicle for a small group of people to take power. So there will be a change. And who knows? We could see, there's a big challenge we face. A lot of people look at politics about the next big decision. I'm always someone who looks 5-10 years ahead. The end of the next parliament, what we risk is fighting the rise of the far right. And the way we do that is to organise now with an alternative set of beliefs. You don't need to be a full detailed policy programme where people have worked out every penny, but the basic principles of running Britain in the interests of the people who do the work. And that is universally popular. And in the Labour, out of the Labour Party, whatever, organise for that, and it will always be in the long-term good.
Okay, great. Given the kind of hollowing out of the Labour Party that you've just described, and given, on the other hand, your description of the work that you're doing and the way in which you think that work, which is your work, but the work of a growing team, is a beacon, then how far do you think that the sort of electoral challenge from independents that you've illustrated could spread? I mean, are you just a one-off to do with the nature of the North East, to do with the nature of what you've done, or do you think one could see a spreading of that? I mean, you've had Emma Dent Code in Kensington. There's a possibility of Jeremy Corbyn. What do you think is the future of this? I don't know. You could say growing, but certainly a tendency for people to be thinking about it as a possibility. Is it spreading, or will it spread?
What's interesting is there was a poll done recently, and it said, if it made no difference to the outcome of the general election, which party would you vote for? And the Greens, who are polling around about 7%, in that, I think, polled around 21%. There's loads of people want to see an alternative. At the moment, they think, yeah, but it's Labour or Tory. The amount of people who've said to me, look, I'm going to vote Labour because I want the Tories out, but I'm going to vote for you, Jamie. And this is where it's different. When it comes to councils, when it comes to mayors, when it comes to assembly elections, we've already seen it broken in Scotland. Now, yes, there's a very nationalistic, not the far-right nationalistic, but it's sort of a national pride movement there. But in England, we're seeing that as well. You said, is it different than the North East? The North East feels a long way from Westminster, and that is undoubtedly part of it. In the North East, by the way, that question, can I win? We've had 6 times independents have won local council mayors, more than Labour have ever won. People have had enough of being dictated to from Westminster. That was what was behind the Brexit vote. People weren't interested in the intricacies of the European Commission. They were sick of people from outside not listening to them. And so it is going to grow. But it will only grow if we have leaders who are capable, and people who believe are capable, not of just shouting and screaming in protest, but of saying, this is how we will fix your buses. This is how we will build homes. This is how we will make sure your local services are better, and have the credibility to do that. If we do that, there will be a massive shift. And sooner or later, that will transform the big main parties. I would love to see a different electoral system, but more than that, I would love to see a different constitutional system where we move much more towards federalism, like just about every major European country there is.
Great. Well, I think it's important to expand the amount of time we've got for the debate, or discussion, or questions. So let's open it up. I don't know if I didn't ask if there's a roving mic or a process for this, but just if you could introduce yourself very briefly, and then could we make it just brief questions so that there can be many contributions?
Hi there. Hello, Hilary. I will be brief.
Yeah. Introduce yourself first.
I'm Jim Ring. I'm a Labour Party member. I've been there since 1964, and they haven't got rid of me yet. Right. Now, Jamie, you're the first person I've listened to who has said succinctly and comprehensively exactly what I've been thinking for the past 2 or 3 years. The way I look about it is 2 simple words: municipalisation and devolution. It's what old Lenin called dual power, right? And I think we're there because I don't think the rich are strong enough to stop us anymore. But here's the question. Unless Starmer starts taxing the rich, there won't be enough money to fund your mayoralty. What are you going to do about it?
Do you want to collect about 3 questions? Yeah.
Because there'll inevitably be overlap.
Yeah. The woman with the white t-shirt.
Just behind you, Dave.
Just behind you there.
Hi, my name's Sally. I am a variously invisible disabled woman who's been stuck at home for 13 years. I've spent the last 3 years rehabilitating myself so that I could come and sit here and get involved because this is horrendous. And I wanted to pick up on a contradiction that I cannot for the life of me understand, and that is that you can go to the psychopaths and make a business case for educating people to get them back into work, and they will give you money. But you can go there with a business case and you can say that having starving kids in terrible homes living in dystopia will cost you a fortune in the long run. Why is that not a business case that matters? Where's the humanity gone?
Could we have some women, more women?
Hello, my name is Paul Granger. I was a Labour Party member until a couple of months ago. I'd just like to ask, well, first I'd like to praise you for all the things you've done and hope you're able to continue to do them. But I do have a lot of reservations about the Metro Mayor model. I just feel uncomfortable about it placing so much power in one person's hands, basically. It's great when it's someone like you with your politics and, you know, your competence, but I just feel as though it's a system which could easily go wrong, and I don't know, it doesn't seem fair to me entirely. Also, I feel as though it sort of weakens the actual local councils and just adds another tier. Having said that, I'm also wondering though, if you win as an independent, now previously you've worked with lots of people and got their support. Do you think you'll be hampered somewhat by people who see you as an independent, particularly from some people within the Labour Party? Do you think that things could be made a bit difficult for you?
Judith over there with the grey. Oh, sorry.
Quick question. If you were offered an enterprise zone, so for those who don't know what an enterprise zone is, it's no tax for corporations to bring wealth into the economy in a particular area. If you were offered an enterprise zone, what would you do?
Can you introduce yourself?
What's your name?
What's your name? Oh, what's your name?
Jenny.
Jenny.
Thanks, Jenny.
Can you take any more?
No, we'll do these
okay,
first.
take those.
Yeah, otherwise it'll take a while. Was it Kieran? Kim? Jim, sorry, Jim. Missed third there. Municipalisation. The how we change things, where's the money coming from, the eternal question. The Labour Party has ruled out any kind of a wealth tax. What is interesting, I find, is I was interviewed by Andrew Marr, and he says, I can't see that there's any alternative to a wealth tax. And I said, yeah, I agree with you. Obviously, it's got to be a wealth tax. It's about working it out right so that we're not, trapping people who have a house but not much income. And he's like, right, why is it I can get a straight answer out of you when I can't get a straight answer out of anyone in Parliament? There is an overwhelmingly obvious case for that. But that is something that's going to have to be done at a national basis. That's the whole point of a Metro Mayor, is you are dealing with different things. What you can do is get huge amounts of money in from other sources. Who is a believer in the divestment campaign that we want pension funds to be coming out of fossil fuels? Me too. I'm having conversations with them because if you want them to divest, you've got to give them something to invest into. About long-term investment. Because this isn't just, pension funds are our money. And they represent trillions of the wealth that is at the moment put into corporate interests because they have to pay the policies, and we want them to pay the policies. They are the deferred wages of working people. But we can shift them. So it's not only getting it from a much more socially just approach, it's also helping people in the meantime. So in my part of the world, the Tyne pension fund has assets of over 10 billion. And we're working with them, and it's slow going because there's a lot of legal stuff to unpick, to say if you were to invest in our transport system and get the returns, it's actually going back to the working people here. And the pensioners have a better transport system. So it's that kind of innovation is what you need to happen. And there are so many people who are trapped in this party politic. They're the bad guys, we're the good guys, who are just saying, right, we'll tax people and then decide how to spend the money. Wealth generation is actually something that the left doesn't talk about well enough. We have better answers for this than the alternatives, than the neoliberal approach. And it's about starting to put them into practice. And we're doing that in a little way already. I'm setting up a venture capital fund. Venture capital fund, the people on the left think that's terrible. But we're owning it, the people. So we will be financing the startups and the scale-ups. And as they grow and develop profits, it comes back to us. Creating jobs and wealth in the North East in a socially, environmentally responsible way, rather than being channeled through the Cayman Islands. Why should we abandon the field to the people who are not going to do anything good, who are just going to extract wealth and trash the planet on the way? We're going to be a monetary economy. Let's make it a good monetary economy. Now, there's things I can't change on a national level, but when people see this working in one place, that's when they start to think, my council will do it, my region will do it, my devolved nation will do it, and national government will think, you know what, this actually it solves all the problems about people avoiding tax and sending it offshore. We'll just make sure the money's going through us in the first place. So that's one of the ways we can do things, is let's be a bit bolder and a bit more imaginative and get out of some of the old tired thinking of thinking we have to tax people to fund things. If there's profitable things out there, let's just own them and let us have the profits and direct them. So, Shelley, the business case, it was Shelley, was it? Sally, my apologies. Business cases for starving kids. My remit, I've got one major task from central government, that's create jobs. And the combined authority is supposed to create 10,000 jobs over 30 years. By now, I should have created about 1,500. It's 5,377 at the last count. We smashed it out of the park because we're good at working with people. That's given me the freedom to have a lot more control over what we've done. So when you talk about starving kids, we run a child poverty prevention program in the schools right across the north of Tyne, dealing with things like school uniform poverty, dealing with things like kids being excluded from after-school clubs, helping people get welfare rights advice. There was one family I know of who got £11,000. They didn't realise they were entitled to the benefits for their disabled son. That's the level at which you can start to make a difference on the ground. When it comes to national policy about, for example, a two-child cap, that's a decision that's taken nationally. So that is about leverage, it's about getting the change on national government. And I would love to have that power, but I don't. But in terms of the business cases, this is where you have to use a little bit of stealth, and that's the reality of what we face, is I'm not going to have the power to change the law or to set national policy. What I do have is a power to how we spend the money we've got and repurposing it. And this is, for example, rather than having these high level, we will outsource, we will do these things, it's about working with the people locally and transforming it in a better way, changing the priorities. So in the adult education budget, the people who've benefited, 21% of them are either have disabilities, self-identify as disabled, or neurodiverse. That's making a big difference. And so that is pushing at the boundaries of what we can do. Do I wish we could do more? Of course I do, of course I do. Paul, the Metro Mayor model. You know, it's funny. Who likes the Westminster model? So as soon as you frame it like that, you think, yeah, actually, is there any good model? Who likes the idea that Rishi Sunak has the power to appoint and fire cabinet ministers when even his own party didn't vote for him, never mind the electorate? So if we start to contrast it against the governance system of Britain, then you think, yeah, is it that bad? No, there are much better ways of doing it. I really think there are. And the actual model is Metro Mayors have no power over local authorities. They don't weaken a damn thing. They're still responsible for everything they are. The powers that are coming down from central government, the ability to convene and the ability to raise capital to do other things. And the more of that is local, the better. Is it a new tier? There are 526 councillors in the first tier authorities across Northumberland, Durham, Tyne and Wear. 22 MPs, 2 police and crime commissioners, and me as a mayor. And after the expanded North East Devolution deal, there will still be 526 councillors, 22 MPs. It doesn't change. It's not a tier. It's one person and a team of people who used to work in Whitehall, now working in the region. And I think that is actually far more democratic. And what you can't do, at least with directly accountable individuals with a personal mandate, is control it by party lists, which is what was proposed in the previous devolution model. And I think party lists are just ripe for stitch-ups. And they've tried to stitch it up by blocking me. But by running as an independent, it was funny. When it happened and I was saying, hey, well, what's going on here? Why are you blocking me? There was a lot of the sort of the Labour right saying, oh, well, if you don't like it, run as an independent. And I ran as an independent. They were like, oh, he's made it all about him. And Jenny on enterprise zones. There are enterprise zones coming to the North East, negotiated 80 million quid. Where's Jenny? Got to show for that. What I've pushed for further and further, and we've got a long way with there. I can't give you the exact number because it's slightly commercially confidential, but it's a lot more than half of it. Will not be tax breaks for 2 reasons. One, I wanted the money up front so I can use it for skills training and infrastructure and better transport infrastructure, better electrical infrastructure, all the things that actually are improving the local area. The second one, because by the way, almost none of these things get taken up. If you look at it, then what actually happens, if a company wants to dodge paying taxes, they can dodge paying taxes. There's a whole range of things. So we're getting a lot more half of it as direct investment. So that's the approach you take. I'm not going to say, no, I'm not having any money. What I'm going to say is, here's a better way. Come and talk to me. And we've done that successfully. But you can only do that if you're a leader who's like right on top of the detail. So when you're in the room with the ministers and the civil servants, you know more about it than they do. And then they're put in this position of thinking, ooh, I haven't got an answer to that. You say, great, we'll pick that up later. And that's how you start to push the agenda. You do have to get involved in trench warfare, basically, on policy to get things done. But just one little thing that James Schneider said on the previous panel, it's worth bearing in mind. He said, the ruling class don't know what they're doing either. This is true. I've had so many conversations with cabinet ministers, with shadow cabinet ministers, with leaders of corporations. They can look at their little interest, but as a solution to all of these problems, they haven't got them. We can outthink them and articulate those ideas. People will think, you know what, I would rather follow this person who seems to have an idea and a track record of delivery than this person who's just saying that lot bad, no, but that lot are bad. Let's focus on the ideas of how we deliver things to make people better and keep the petty personal politics out of it. Tempting and enjoyable though it is to have a go at these people.
Great. So, over there, Judith. Introduce yourself.
I'm Judith, yes. I think you may have actually addressed this already when you said it was about wealth creation. My question is about how you get along with and work with the neighbouring mayoralty, and I think it's called North of Weir. Is that right?
Tees Valley, perhaps.
Well, anyway, it's a conservative. So there may be some area for conflict there. It would be nice to know if you can work reasonably well with him. He seems quite ebullient when I've seen him on newscasts and things like that, quite aggressive. And the other thing is just at the end, can we have Driscoll for PM?
Any more? So the woman with the greenish top, yellow, there, yeah.
Over here.
Over here.
Yeah, sorry. Okay.
You'll have to run a bit.
Keeping you fit there, Dave.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Laurel. I'm from the Southwest, but I did used to live here in Liverpool. And my question really is about the NHS and dental services and how they are being... Dental services have practically vanished. And NHS services have, 42 footprints now seem to be the designated way the NHS is delivered. And I wondered what influence you might have, because that is the basis, really, of equality, is a fair and accessible health service and dental service.
Good one. Anybody else? So the man in the blue shirt.
Hi, my name's Sam. You spoke about how you would socialise public transport, and I suppose my thought about that was that it inevitably, trying anything like that will be advertised as an attack on car owners, drivers, like the sort of thing that's kind of coming through now. And I wondered if you had a vision for what goes, if you achieve everything you want to achieve, what comes next, because after that would have to come trying to get as many cars off the road as possible, and how that works with the conflicting views that people will create, but also taking into account people with disabilities, people that live in rural areas, and what have you.
Can you say one more?
Yeah.
Okay, so one more. Woman in the black shirt here. Just a second row from the front.
Love the T-shirt.
This is more of like a vague question, I think follows on from everyone else. But so say you do get elected as the independent mayor and Keir Starmer, do get a Labour government. Do you anticipate much backlash from the neoliberal faction of the Labour Party? And then in that instance, how would you leverage the power you've built and the grassroots connections you have against such backlash? Yeah.
What's your name?
Libby.
Thanks, yeah. Well, I'll take your question first, Libby. What will happen is once a party is in government, their mindset changes. Being in opposition is very much about, they're bad, I would have done it differently. When you are there, driving around in your ministerial limo, going from meeting to meeting, thinking, oh my God, there's this problem, there's that problem, there's the other problem, and I pop up with my happy smiling face, and no one can stay mad at me for long, and say, I've got an answer that will fix that, they will think, you know what, I might just take this. Because people, when they go into power, you've all heard the phrase, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. That's not actually borne out by psychological experiments. What happens is what power does is it makes people think the rules don't apply to them. And that is borne out by psychological research. Once people get into these ministerial positions, they have this tendency to think, what's going to make my life easier? Everybody does it. It's perfectly human. We must go with the grain of human psychology. And that is, right, well, if I do this, you can claim it as a success story, can't you? And it's, yeah, all right, he's not nasty. He's not wanting to take me down. This works. I could claim it as a credit. How much do you want, Jamie? And that is exactly how I managed to get more money than anybody else for the combined authority, the new devolution deal that we're getting. We're talking about, I think it was Fatima was saying, we've got to abandon ideological purity as a first principle. What your first principle should be, always, is how do you make life better for the people you represent? And if that involves me shaking hands with Tories, I've done that and it's worked. It's dead easy to shake hands with a lot of the Labour front bench, a lot of whom are deeply uncomfortable with the position of the party at the moment and are holding the line because they've bought into this idea, look, let's just get the Tories out. I also think there's a faction there who actually genuinely believe the politics they're pushing forwards. And a lot of the people who are thinking, you know what, the two-child poverty cap is bloody ridiculous, they will be very, very happy to have me as an outrider saying, well, I think it would be better if Labour did this policy. Not having a go at them as nasty people, but just that common sense. Why are we keeping people hungry when it costs us more in the long term? And that sort of approach actually gives you a lot more leverage than if you're a Labour Party mayor who's only got there as a result of factional manoeuvres, and you are dependent upon those people to keep in power. Once you've got a mandate from the people, you can stand there and say, well, look, there's 2 million people backing me. Who's backing you? And that's pretty powerful. Seb, actually, Laurel's question on the NHS. Everything you're saying, Laurel, is absolutely right. NHS is not going to be devolved. The integrated care boards are just, I'm not even going to get into that because I'll just rant for 10 minutes. The North East and Cumbria one doesn't even match the local authority boundaries anymore. I'm a firm believer that if you've got what's called coterminosity, that all the services are working in the same area, you can dovetail, you get better results for people, obviously. The key thing that you mentioned was what influence will you have? So I have met with them. We are talking about a radical prevention fund. It's not going to be a vast amounts of money. It's not going to be about clinical intervention. It's going to be much more on the prevention side. One of the things that neoliberalism has led us to is this belief, that this every man for himself belief, that our public services are so stretched because we now wait until things have gone wrong before we try to fix them, rather than prevention. One of the reasons I'm so keen on public transport is actually people are healthier. Dentistry is not a subject I have any expertise over, other than that I know my own dentist is backing me for re-election because she keeps telling me that. You're absolutely right, we need to be moving at the prevention. We've worked with Michael Marmot on closing health inequalities, but the clinical intervention, that is something that at the moment the national government will have to do. I'm not terribly happy, putting it mildly, at the way that the current Labour Health Secretary or Shadow Health Secretary is pushing privatisation. And just look it up. You see how much money these people are being sponsored by American private healthcare companies. As Deep Throat said, follow the money. It's not good news. But where do we have? Seb, socialising public transport. This is the crucial interest, the crucial question in politics is how do we defeat these divisive culture wars and get people to realise what works for them? And first of all, it's to think of it in that space. I got a letter when I went independent from a group called, apologies if I get this wrong, the British Democratic Party. I'd never heard of them. And it was, we believe that we need more democracy. We believe that we should have our policies done in the interest of the working people of Britain. I'm thinking good so far. We believe that we should support white people. Oh! And we are so used to hearing our politicians frame things in their own interest that my first response is, yeah, that other bit is just a cover for your racism. And then I thought about it, and this was a very amateurish letter full of spelling mistakes. And I thought, you know what, they might actually believe that. You know, why do we assume that just because Sunak says things in a certain way for electoral advantage, or the Labour Party, Keir Starmer saying, oh, I respect Margaret Thatcher on law and order, you know, tell that to the Orgreave miners, tell that to the Hillsborough families. Margaret Thatcher was no fan of law and order, she was a fan of repression. Quick hands up, who's seen The Old Oak, the Ken Loach film? Be careful saying you like Ken Loach films, it will get you barred from the Labour Party. The pub conversations in that, there's a lot of people who haven't put their hands up, so no spoilers. The pub conversations in that were brilliant. I know Paul Laverty, the writer, well, and spoke to him when he was developing the film, the script. He will have sat in pubs and just listened and earwigged and written it down, because it was so realistic that people on the one hand are, oh yeah, it's terrible, this war zone, but why are they coming over here? And yeah, but you know, we need better public service, and no one in bloody Westminster cares for us. And this whole spectrum of just anger and feeling left behind. And everything that came out of Manchester last week from the Tory conference was about, oh, be angry at someone else. Oh, we need change. The country's in a mess. You've been in power for 13 years. And the Labour Party saying, this is terrible, look what the Tories are going to do. What are you going to do? The same. You know, and so when you talk to car owners and you say, do you like sitting in traffic jams? They know it's a trick question because the obvious answer is no, we don't. But it's not a trick question because it speaks to their lived experience. And you say, well, when you go for a night out, wouldn't you like to be able to get the bus and have a drink? And they say, well, yeah, I would actually, but the bus doesn't run. So if I make the buses run, is that, yeah, it is, yeah. And by the way, if we change the traffic junctions so that the buses can nip through with a transponder on the bus, the technology works. It's well proven in pretty much every country apart from Britain, frankly. So that as you approach the bus junction, the bus nips through because it changes the light in the bus light to green, then it's back to green for the cars, and then the cars... Every bus takes 50 cars off the road. So that a plumber with a van full of tools or a GP on call can get there faster and do their job. And people are thinking, so hang on, less traffic congestion, and I'm going to have a better bus service. And frankly, in the North East, the 48% of people who do not have access to a vehicle, and you think, yeah, and all the rural areas, we're going to put that into an on-demand system with one ticket. So if you're in, and it's a big area, it's 110 miles from Berwick to Barnard Castle, even if you're not having your eyes tested. And that's bigger than the distance from London to Bristol or London to Norwich. That's the size of my patch. You get that fully integrated with a publicly funded car club so that you can get your groceries delivered, you can get to work or education. And if you want to go for a week away for the weekend, you can just hire a car. And you're thinking, do I really need a car? A lot of people will. But a lot of people will decide their family doesn't need two cars, given that it's £4,800 a year to run a car, and you can have a full unlimited travel for £1,000 a year across the entire region. You know what, I might just save the 3,800 quid and we'll stick down to one car. Fewer cars on the road, less emissions. Less need for frankly, our charging infrastructure just isn't up to it anyway. And so that is how we make it. And when I talk to people about that, they say, this guy seems to know what he's talking about. And when I tell them, look, I'm a professional engineer by trade, and I only became a politician at 48, they start to think, he's someone who gets it. I used to own and run a business. That's how you get people. You've got to get people trusting you before they will listen to you. But what we don't do is you don't say, oh, I've got the counter-argument to why you're wrong, because then you take nobody with you. And it's working. And people after people from all sorts of different views and beliefs are supporting me. And the really funny thing when the Labour Party blocked me, there was, they'd put the Labour front bencher up and they'd frozen out. The Labour Party rang up the BBC and took the local candidate off and they put in Baroness Chapman to sort of defend the decision. And there was the local Tory there who was the deputy leader of Northumberland County Council and worked with me through the combined authority. And he says, what do you think of this? And he says, well, I don't want to tread on the private grief of the Labour Party. He says, but I'll have a go. And he says, you used to work with James. Yes, I worked with him in the combined authority. When he was elected, he gave this very firebrand speech about how we need to change things, this very momentum speech. He says, working with him, he says he was really professional. He's really intelligent. He gets stuff done. I don't understand why the Labour Party have blocked this. And we've clipped that, and that will be going out later in my election campaign. Because there is an objective truth. And if you just say that the culture wars are bloody stupid, what makes a difference to your life, then everyone thinks, hey, you know what, you're right. And that makes a difference. And the more people do that, the better politics we'll have, regardless of me as mayor in the North East. And Judith question, wealth question. How do I get on with the Tees Valley Combined Authority mayor? The honest answer is neither well nor badly, because I've only met him twice in person. I reach out a lot and he doesn't come back, he doesn't turn up to things. One of the things is I extend, because there's a gap in the south of Tyne that's coming into the new authority with us, and it'll be right on the border. And I will be negotiating with them about a reciprocal deal on public transport, because the people in, if it means anything to anyone, Newton Aycliffe, which is right near Darlington, in and out of Worth, if they're getting a joint ticketing system, I want them to do it. And I'll be doing the same thing in Berwick with the Scottish Government. And so that's actually usually comes down to look, it's going to give you something to shout about for your people. All right, I'll do that. We'll find a way of finding the money, and that might limit what we can do if they're not willing to put money in. But generally, that works just fine. Your final question, should we be having Driscoll for PM? I want to represent the North East, and I'm a big believer in devolution and politicians staying close to the power. And I can do more good showing that progressive policies work, that it is entirely possible to run in the interests of the people who do the work. And if I make that work there, then someone else can come along and be Prime Minister and do it on a national level.
So we've got time for probably 2 more questions. Is it some... Oh, yes, you've seen somebody, yeah, good.
Hi, my name's David. I'll keep it short. If devolution means more radical and bold policies can be implemented, how can we create a path for more devolution in the current Westminster system?
One more. A guy in a white shirt at the back here.
I don't actually have a question, just this person had the hand up for ages.
Can you introduce yourself, please?
This person had their hand up for ages, so I was going to give them.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Nancy. I joined the Labour Party when I was 14, and then I left when I was 18, and I'm an undergraduate politics student at the University of Liverpool. And the question I have is, I'm obviously very inspired by you and other socialists, but how are we meant to stay so positive during the climate crisis? Because I look to my future and I think, oh my God, I don't know how to say it, but I don't see a future because of the climate crisis. A lot of my friends are vegans and vegetarians because of it, and some of my friends have even decided not to have children at the age of 19 and 20 because of the climate crisis.
Great, thanks. Sorry to not see you earlier. I've got one... I've got one short question which follows a bit from that, which is to do with the trade unions and the climate crisis and your is it work deal, your sort of contract compliance, where you use local authority purchasing power to do a deal with companies on condition that they can only supply the council if they are decent, provide decent wages and so on. Do you in any way involve the unions in that relationship? And could that be extended to be about decarbonisation and moving to a low carbon economy, so that where a company is a sort of high carbon producer or damaging the environment, you can negotiate with the unions supporting you to shift production or to shift the company in some way towards being a kind of low carbon producer. So can you use your leverage there to address the climate crisis?
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't get the name of the gentleman over there. David. Thank you, David. A radical devolution agenda. How do we get it on the political agenda? I think that's going to happen on its own, but it'll happen a lot faster if we talk about it. The temptation. The Westminster bubble is accurately named. What the Westminster bubble talks about is who's up and who's down. Is Rishi Sunak falling out with Suella Braverman? Angela Rayner seems to be back in the fold, but does, she really like Kiss? All of that. It's a soap opera. Our national politics is a soap opera. If we start talking about how we fix things, there is nothing that cannot be fixed, that can be fixed without it being local. Even HS2, a national project, has to, in the end, be local. Because every piece of metal that's a track has to be in a physical location. Everyone who does a job, even if they're working from home, is doing it from a real place. We should start to think about not what do we think of the politicians, because you're not going to get many positive answers, and to who actually delivers these things. And I've repeated it several times already. I believe Britain should be run in the interests of the people who do the work. That is a very practical, common sense way to look at things. Why is it that we decide that party people are making decisions because they will play well with the electorate on how we assess schools? One of the things we've done in the north of Tyne is we fund a continuing professional development programme, and we let the teachers have the money so they can get the time from one school to go to another school, and they peer review them. And they learn more, and they share things. So it's not Ofsted turning up saying, jump through the hoops. It's worked. And teachers have said to me, Jamie, I've found my teaching mojo again. That sort of evidence, the stories that come out, that's how we make it real for people, the stories of it. So it's not an abstract, which then gets bumped by the personality politics, is this affects my job, this affects my home. Yeah, I want a piece of that. That's how we do that, David. Your question, Hilary, do we work with the trade unions? Yeah. The pattern for this, yes, we do. I've set up Net Zero North East England with others, where we are directly working with companies. I've got 51 local companies directly on something called Challenge North Tyne, where they are developing climate-friendly products, looking at the rate we rework things. But the pattern for this is something called Union Learn. Hands up if anyone's heard of Union Learn. So there's a few people who've been involved in it in the past. This used to be a central government policy where there was a network of workplace reps would help people find training programs so they could stay in their current employer, get trained up, earn more money. Good for the employer, good for the person, good use of public money. Tories pulled it. I stepped in. It is now funded and actually has 3 times the capacity it had when central government had it. And the people who are delivering it, the TUC locally. So I directly fund the trade union movement to deliver things that are in the interests of working people. And the only person in the country who does that. We can do this and it works. And it's better value for money than it ever was. So, yeah, we can do it and we should do it and not be frightened of engaging with the trade union movement. And it annoys the hell out of me when Labour politicians and local authorities as well. They will talk to the CBI. I talk to the CBI. They'll talk to the Chambers of Commerce, but they'll say, talk to the trade unions. Oh, well, that's political. I'm not sure we can do that. Of course, it's representing the people, millions of people in this country. It's not political. It's democratic. So we do that. And Nancy, your question. My sons are 15 and 17, so almost your age. My younger son, Hillary's met him, Nelson. He is very eloquent and very charismatic. He's a member of Extinction Rebellion, and he does the banner drops on the motorways and the leafleting and the engagement. And he said to me, he said, look, Dad, people my age are not actually worried about a mortgage and a pension, which is what we're told young people worry about. He says, I'm worried about whether by the time I'm your age, there will be food in the supermarkets, whether there will be law and order. And he says, and that's just logic. He's very good at science. He knows his stuff. And he says, but I was talking to someone today, and it occurred to me, it is also logical to have hope. Because if we don't have hope, we will stop fighting. And whatever the future is, it's not yet written. Everybody, including you, Nancy, can write on the page of history. Never let anybody tell you you have no power and no voice. A few years ago, I was just a grassroots activist, one of the people doing sessions here in The World Transformed. Now, I'm probably the most powerful socialist in this country. Almost by accident. So, decide your own future. But above all, find people who want to come on that journey with you. Because it's hard work and it can be exhausting. There's a lot of people telling you you're wrong. But you stick to what you believe. You speak to the other people in here. You build the networks. And you decide, no, enough is enough. I do not like that future. I will stand and fight it. And I'll join you every step of the way. How about that?
Well, that's a brilliant point on which to end. And I hope next year we'll be welcoming you to TWT as the Mayor of the North East. And that actually the discussion... the discussion on the platform will be between you and Ken Loach. Anyway, so thanks everybody for participating in this in such a robust way. And I just want to give a quick shout out to Red Pepper, because I think that's one of the places, one of many, I mean, we're not saying we're the place, where you get this debate that's beyond the either or, that's about standing up for yourself, standing up for socialism in your own way. And so Andrew over there is giving out subscription leaflets. It's very cheap to subscribe. And then we've got a stall slightly hidden away in the cafe where you can get the latest Red Pepper, where there's a very good article in the TWT section on Beyond the Binaries, looking at the electoral politics. We need to have a fundraising shout out, and then good luck with the rest of the TWT.
Cheers. Thanks so much, Hillary. Give it up. Nice one. Cheers, Jamie. I won't take up too much of your time. Cheers, comrades. Much appreciated. As you can see, this is where the real opposition is. We're not going to get... Keir Starmer's not coming to save us. Our future here was really uncertain last year, but we were saved by the generosity of just ordinary ticket holders and our partners. Our financial future is not completely certain, so if you can make any sort of donations to us to make sure that we can keep on providing travel and accommodation and food to all of our 150 volunteers, we can provide hundreds of free tickets as well. That would be amazing. The standard price of everyone's ticket is about 50% of what it actually costs per head for us to run the festival. So it would be amazing if you can make any sort of small donation. We've got buckets around, do we? Oh, and card holders. Silas has a bucket, Hope has card holders. You can also donate by going to bit.ly/TWT23 donate. TWT is in capitals and the D of donate is in capitals as well. If you can make any sort of contribution, that'd be amazing. £1, £2, £5, £10,000, I don't know, that'd be amazing.